Hitting go live on Facebook now.
So
if we haven't been
live already, again, I'll just say it. This is an experimental news site, and what we're doing here is highly experimental. My name is Eugene Driscoll. I'm a reporter with valleyindy.org. The guy in the shirt is Ethan Fry. He is the we're all wearing shirts, thankfully. He is 50%. You got 100% of the Valley Indy right here. We're taping a podcast. Our podcasts appear on WNHH 103.5 FM, as I was saying, every Monday at noon. You can also get them on iTunes and SoundCloud and valleyindy.org and YouTube, Google Play, anywhere you get podcasts.
Libsyn.
You can get Navel Gazing. But we thought, in addition to taping our audio podcast, we would try to stream the conversation live. And this is a way for us to test out this crazy setup we have with a webcam and a HD camcorder hooked up to some wire. I don't even know what it is, into a Thunder port with a USB mic. And what I love about this job is that we just try stuff. I don't care if this is embarrassing or if it's a total failure, whatever. We just try stuff, and if it works, it works. And it's all about communicating with the people of the valley.
Wouldn't be the first failure in the history of journalism.
So. No. And what I love is that we basically tried this last year, couldn't get it to work, but half of the what's fun about this job is that we wait for the technology to get to our level where we can do stuff for free. You know, this camera setup that you're seeing on Facebook right now is OBS. That's free software. That we finally managed to rig and make work, hopefully. So, and it's like I'm borrowing my wife's laptop, and she's the one that set up the way the Valley Independent Sentinel is. So it's all great community stuff. So that being said, Rick Dunne is just sitting here patiently. He's a member of the deep state trying to overthrow the government. And I'll just break that news right now. But let's start. Now we're going to start our podcast. So if you have questions for Rick, you can post them in the comments below. I don't know where I should be, but I'm not going to promise I'm going to see them because we've got a lot going on here, and I'm already overwhelmed. So here we go. Now it's going to be weird because I'm going to do the introduction again because we need to do it. We're going to edit out that part of the audio on our podcast, and this will be the actual podcast. So everybody put their pants on.
We're doing it live. I mean, that's the beauty of it.
Doing it live. All right. Hi, I'm Eugene Driscoll. Welcome to Navel Gazing on 103.5 WNHH. New Haven's community radio station. I'm joined by my partner in crime, Valley Indy reporter Ethan Fry.
G'day.
How you doing, Ethan?
Good. Very good.
And we should say we're streaming this live on Facebook as we record. What's today? Thursday, March 8th?
I believe
9th.
It is the 9th. Just looking at my phone.
Says you.
Definitely the 9th.
So that voice you heard, we have a very special guest, our old friend, well, he's not old, but our good friend, Rick Dunne, who's the executive director of the Naugatuck Valley Council of Governments. Rick, thanks for being on Navel Gazing.
Thank you, Eugene. Good to be here.
And I really got to thank you because this is a wacky one because we got all this different stuff going on. So we haven't had you on in a while, probably since the Great Give last year. You were on as part of our Beat Up the Valley Indy segment.
Yes,
you and Kurt Miller.
Segment of that broadcast.
I think it was our most viewed of all the YouTube videos we did.
Probably because Kurt Miller was on.
Miller is he's like a Kardashian. He's just the man is just ratings. Yeah. He's just wherever he goes, people just want to look. So anyway, let's talk about O'Sullivan's Island first of all, Rick. We're going to talk. We haven't asked you about this in a really long time. O'Sullivan's Island is a little meadow there in Derby under the Route 8 bridge. It kind of juts out. It's a peninsula. It's not an island, but hey, what do you want? It juts out into the...
It used to be an island.
One time, yeah, yes. But then they filled it up with garbage and then it became... Or was it tectonics? What is that, plate tectonics? What?
No.
Okay.
It was
a landfill.
It was largely landfill.
So, and there's been contamination there for a very, very, very long time. A couple of years ago, there was a renewed effort to make sure the ground is safe. It's been closed for a while out of an abundance of caution, as you do or your agency oversees, supervises, along with a lot of other deep state agencies. We
work at the direction of the city, just to be clear. So we are taking direction from the city, and we coordinate with the State Department of Environmental Protection, Energy Environmental Protection. Someday I'll get used to that.
Deep.
And other funders and partners in the project.
And the goal here is to basically see, all right, what do we have in the ground? How do we deal with it? And ultimately, what would we need to do to clean it up?
Sure. Well, there are a couple of issues there.
Yeah, what's the latest? It's not open right now, right? Because I haven't asked about it in a very long time. Technically, it's not open.
Technically, the Board of Aldermen, I do not believe, has taken action to reopen the site.
Okay.
And it's been my agency's recommendation that they not do so, but it becomes complicated as to why. So maybe a little history. I know this is not a long show, so I'll try and cover 20 years in 20 seconds. But
go.
So O'Sullivan's Island, their problems with contamination largely stem from two things. It was a landfill at one time. It was a municipal dump in the 30s. Later on, it was a fire training facility established by the state of Connecticut, authorized by the state of Connecticut. The land was actually owned by the state for a long period of time while it was a fire training facility and when Route 8 was being built. So sometime in the 80s, many barrels of PCB-contaminated chemicals were found buried on the site. They removed several hundred, as I recall, at that point. Superfund ran out of money and they basically shut down the job. But no one knew how it got there, who put it there, where it came from. So we know a lot more today about those things. Basically, it was a good faith effort by the firefighters in the area to try and work with chemicals that were being used in the factories in the area. After World War II in particular, but into the 50s and 60s, firefighters were entering these factories to fight fires and were encountering things that could not be put out with normal firefighting equipment, water primarily. So they needed to train on this. So they worked out with area manufacturers, send us a couple barrels of these used contaminants, used chemicals, and we'll burn them, train with them, figure out how to put the fires out.
And I would assume the factory owners were like, okay, that makes our life a little easier.
Yeah,
Here you go.
I mean, our guess is that originally they just sent a few things down and it worked out. After 1973, when the EPA started regulating under what's called RCRA, you have to manifest these chemicals as they come in. You have to show how they left. So these companies had lots of chemicals that were very expensive to get rid of. And our best understanding of the situation was they just kept shipping them down to O'Sullivan's Island for training. At some point, they had so many of these barrels.
It's like Lucy in that chocolate episode, but it's toxic waste.
Right. So we don't know. Well, and to be fair, they it's a little bit like people in the 50s saying they didn't realize that smoking hurt you, but was bad for you. But there were these barrels. It was unknown what was really in them, or the type of contaminants that this represented. It's unknown who buried them. That's something we don't know, or how that happened. We know basically what companies they came from. I'm not going to name names today. Most of those companies don't exist any longer, or can't be touched. But the fire training facility was clearly under the control of the state. It's a licensed fire training facility. They were discovered. Turned out not all of them were discovered in the 80s. We discovered many, many, many more over the last 10 years. The city ended up in a $5 million emergency removal with EPA. Not to badmouth EPA, but they didn't even remediate the site to their own standards. They left things in place. The other complication is it's not a floodplain. It is a floodway, which means water overtops it during flood conditions on a regular basis. So even though there was a cap of clean soil and a membrane to warn people don't dig below this level, later testing showed that cap was not at least intact in the way it had been represented when they completed the emergency removal.
And that's that removal was much more recent than that was in the 2009-10 we're talking about. Around that time period.
Yeah, I'm really bad with dates, but that's about right.
Not
that's
the 90s or
right.
80s.
That's about right.
Okay.
So we've set about at the city's direction, trying to come up with a solution. The short, and I'm not an attorney, but the short story is this. Derby owns the land. Should they, and there are orders against the site from DEEP. Should those orders be enforced for a particular reason, Derby would be stuck with a cost of cleanup. We think that the cleanup costs probably exceed $5 million additionally to remediate it to a standard that both EPA and DEEP can accept under the written regulations. Now, they can accept greater amounts of contamination left in place under certain conditions, which we think is a much lower cost figure. The point is to try and negotiate that to get it into a condition where it's safe, where everybody feels comfortable that we've stabilized the site and that it can be used for any number of purposes. Now, the fact that it's in a floodway means we're never really going to build buildings down there. Structures aren't going to be built. So we end up now with a situation where the Department of Public Health, we have gone to on behalf of the city and said, look, take a look at these reports, take a look at what was done. Give us an opinion whether there's a risk to human health by letting people go on the site. And the Department of Public Health has basically said it's okay. We don't feel there's a problem. There are some spots that need to be cleaned up, but we don't feel there's a problem allowing people to passively use the site. So that's the information that exists today for the city. We've recommended to the board that until we complete a full investigation and try and attempt to get the full cleanup done at the state's cost, because our position is the state holds the responsibility for the cleanup. If Derby were to get sued for the cleanup by DEEP at some point, and I'm not saying that that's going to happen, but if that were to happen, Derby's fiduciary duty would require them to go turn around and sue 20 some odd parties who have used and authorized use at the site. It wouldn't be fair for the Derby Board of Aldermen to agree to pay all this money when in fact there were the state of Connecticut and 19 other or 20 other users of the site who contributed to this contamination. So we're trying to eliminate that. So we're working with the mayor. We're working with state DECD, and this is where it ties into sort of the downtown project.
Like, do you have any equipment there now?
No, we're not doing anything there at the moment. What we're trying to do is get a compromise in place. Big picture plan, negotiate with EPA. This is tricky. Even though the state is the environmental regulator, the federal government regulates PCBs. So EPA decides what is a sufficient cleanup. 10 parts per billion is what we hope they will approve. Less than 1 part per, I take that back, million part per million.
Well, I'm sure there's new EPA standards now. This will all go away in a second.
Well, right.
The land will be bleeding.
We'll work under current law.
Toxi can rise out of the ground from
But
trauma.
if we could get agreement, for instance, to go to 1 part per million, then that cost comes down dramatically, and we feel that it would still be we'd be able to protect people more than sufficiently if they use the site.
So there's been it was sort of controversial, this idea that we can consolidate sewage treatment plants, at least controversial to some. But now there was this, or there is this, or there's going to be this study where we're finally gonna get an answer as to can we consolidate some of these WPCA facilities in the valley, which are incidentally always built right on the shores of the rivers.
Well, yeah, and the one in Derby is smack dab in the middle of this redevelopment zone, right? So that's
it's there,
bordering. Yeah,
it's smelly and
riverfront.
It's there.
Yeah.
It's widely seen in DPZ that when they did public opinion survey stuff, everyone said that the biggest negative is that.
That report had no recommendation on the sewage plant, right?
I think that ideally move it, get rid of it.
No, but
study it, get rid of it.
I'm just noting that they didn't address it in their report.
I didn't know they were. Okay, were they supposed to?
No, I'm just. making an observation.
So that's when the deep state comes in. You and your deep state colleagues, you guys are because the thing is, like, if you ask Derby and Ansonia, like locally, there were different opinions as to whether or not Derby and Ansonia could consolidate. It was always sort of a political thing to some extent. And the state has come in, and now they're studying it. Where does that stand?
Well, where it stands is my agency applied to the state of Connecticut for funding under a specific program to look at consolidating municipal services. We did that application. We were funded. It has taken quite a bit of time. Funding was announced in May of 2016. We got our signed contract in the mail yesterday.
Wow, what was the anything of note?
Partly, I think it might have been the state budget crisis. They wanted to make sure that the revenue was there. And just so everyone's aware, the money for this is a set aside. It doesn't come through the budget. It's a piece of the sales tax that's set aside and doesn't go through the normal budgetary process. It's there for these particular types of activities. So we have a number of partners on this project now. We are going to look at all of the plants, Naugatuck, Beacon Falls, Seymour, Ansonia, and Derby. We're probably going to have the consultant break it into bite-sized pieces and then look at a larger approach as we get deeper into the study. Separately, we're going to conduct a governance study. This is really the harder part of a lot of these decisions. I mean, engineering-wise, there's an old saying, there's nothing you can't build without enough money and good engineering. I don't even think you need that much money to build a pipe between at least the Ansonia and Derby plant, and probably from Beacon Falls to Derby. Wouldn't take much effort. We're talking pipes and pumps.
Yeah, wait, you said governance. What does that even mean?
Well,
The WPCAs?
Yeah, the WPCAs. So,
which are just, I'm going to editorialize.
Like quasi.
They are a strange thing because, like, I'm not qualified to talk. I mean, I sit at those meetings, and God bless those people. That seems like it should be the fact that that's just appointed Joe citizens is amazing to me.
Yeah,
given the complexities and
if you believe in reincarnation, you might think those people did something bad in a prior life because they are suffering.
How dare you insult Jack Walsh meetings like that? Jack Walsh,
Jack is
Nuncio,
a saint.
Great man. No. But it's hard work, and no one really understands it, and no one's ever happy with any decision a WPCA makes. The problem with governance, though, is this: if you're thinking about consolidating systems, during the Reagan administration, there were laws passed that required user fees and not general tax levy to support sanitary sewer systems. So in the old days, cities would just issue bonds, tax everyone, and build a sewer system, which was primarily repaid by the federal government under the Clean Water Act. There was a user fee requirement put into place sometime in the 80s. WPCAs got created out of that because they had to be separate from the city. So the city theoretically controls them through the power of appointment. But they can issue their own debt. They can have their own rate-setting structures, depending on how they're set up. There are, I believe, 3 statutes in Connecticut that can allow for or govern the merger of water pollution control facilities of different types, of different sizes, whether it's a governance merger, whether it's a physical merger of plants.
Because the fear that I hear is that if you merge, like if Ansonia and Derby merge their WPCAs, suddenly you got, people from Ansonia jacking up my rates because I live in Derby.
Right.
Cassetti doesn't care about me.
Right. And that's what we have to solve with the governance study. We have to come up with a model that gives fair representation to everyone.
Is there any thought to just doing away with I guess you can't, like doing away with just appointing Joe citizen and trying to make it part of would like state control be ever beyond the table?
Well, I mean, there are regional authorities, MDC in the Hartford area. There are a few others that have been quote unquote regionalized, but to my knowledge, no one who already had independent operations and independent plants then came together and merged into a single organization, whether it's physical infrastructure that's being merged or it's just a governing body that's being merged. But the expertise is supposed to come from the engineer. You hire a good engineer. You hire a good plant operator. They advise the board. You hire a good attorney when you're dealing with debt for infrastructure development. And much as people don't like to talk about this, when a business wants to come to your town and they are building a facility that creates a lot of wastewater, and that system doesn't accommodate the existing system does not accommodate that much wastewater, there may be a charge for them to create the infrastructure necessary to handle it. A hotel is a classic example. You build a hotel, you create all this wastewater. People don't really care how long a shower they take in the hotel.
Right. Yeah.
So
I flood them. But that's so if your WPCA can't handle the capacity, that hotel's going to go elsewhere.
That is true. It could be a factor in a number of places where hotels might otherwise go. So when we look at this, what are we talking about? We're talking about a physical study of infrastructure to see if something can be consolidated, if a system can operate at a scale that is less expensive and makes more sense for the ratepayers, for the residents and businesses who actually pay the bills. That's the goal here. There's nothing else in play. Now, you look at Ansonia, Derby, Seymour, Beacon Falls, Naugatuck. Other than Ansonia, all of those have some level of negotiation going on with the federal government over the operation of their plants, or some aspect of operation of their plants.
Is that just because I know in Derby it's old and it's been traditionally underfunded from what I've heard? Like they waited to do repairs. Is that the case? Is that common?
It's not.
Or is it because the feds change the regs all the time?
It's not uncommon. Cities tend not to invest in these things if they can get away without doing it. Certain cities. Beacon Falls has a small plant built in a different age that can't accommodate expansion very well. They're looking at options like merging with Seymour or expanding their own plant. They have a number of options in front of them right now, and they're in the midst of this. Naugatuck is fine for the moment. Interestingly, Naugatuck has never had a sewer use fee. Because they make enough money processing, incinerating the cake that comes from a whole bunch of other sewage treatment plants. So they have kind of the classic example of a cooperative system. It's a market-based system. There are other options for disposing of this stuff, but
building an anaerobic digester.
Anaerobic digestion is a good idea. The anaerobic food digesters are much more efficient, much cleaner, much better for the environment than there are some that have been at converted sewage treatment plants that produce a lot of methane and still put mercury and heavy metals and things back into
and Ethan mentions that because that was something that was
brought up
proposed in Ansonia
and rejected basically by the public.
Yeah, and the change of administration officially kind of kiboshed it. We haven't heard anything about that.
Well, there's a new one that's just about to open in Connecticut. It was a big story about 2 weeks ago.
Hugh Bailey write it?
No.
Your friend Hugh?
No, it was not Hugh.
I love Hugh Bailey, actually. He's a good guy.
I'm glad. Actually, I don't know who wrote the article. It was, again, you can find it on the NVCOG Facebook page.
I stopped following that a while ago.
I hope it was Bob Miller.
Once they stopped posting Valley Indie stories, I was like, click, unlike.
Well, actually,
then I report everything you do. I just report as fake news. Fake news.
I think we do. Are you related to my roommate from college?
Probably no. I'm the first one in my family to go to college. I think.
I was telling something, and
we should probably. We're out of time anyway. We were talking about the sewage stuff, and then that study is now just about underway.
Let me make 2 quick points for you. So the biggest obstacle to combining plants is that every system has what's called an I&I problem, inflow and infiltration of clean water. And the dirty little secret of wastewater, sanitary wastewater, is that users pay to process an awful lot of clean water through their sewage treatment plant. It's also one of the reasons that some systems dump raw sewage into the river in heavy rain events, because they have so much rainwater and groundwater seeping into their systems, the pumps can't handle
That's
it.
Derby Roosevelt Drive. That's what happened there.
I did not say that.
We've written about it.
Those are some of the classic examples, but the cost of
and getting that stuff out of there.
but the cost
Not
of
easy.
upgrading existing systems and plants just in our region, we are talking potentially $500 million between all these plants. The federal money is no longer there to reimburse. The state system could be as much as a 10-year wait for funding to upgrade your plant. In the meantime, you're out of compliance with the federal standards and subject to fine. So if we don't find a way to not spend $500 million, users are going to end up paying that money, and your sewer use fees are going, what used to be $100 or $200 a year is now becoming more commonly $300, $400, $500 a year. The commercial rates are going through the roof. And this is because of the plant upgrades that are required to comply with law to keep these discharges that are poisoning rivers out of water courses. So what we want to do is find a way to spend some money up front to eliminate the need to upgrade all of these plants. And let's face it, if you were going to build a whole new water treatment system, sewage treatment system today, you wouldn't build 7 plants along a 10-mile stretch of the Naugatuck River.
Right.
You'd probably build 1 plant. And you'd be looking at a lot less capital investment, repair and replacement. So that's what we're going after. It's going to be about an 18-month study. We're going to do a first phase, issue a report relatively quickly to help us determine the direction of the balance of the report, and then we'll start spending money on some preliminary engineering activities that will demonstrate, hopefully, whether the efficacy of some of these ideas.
Get some regionalism on the table, which is always
thing.
talked about, but this is sort of, yeah. So I'm getting excited about sewage here.
Durbonia.
Take that. Oh, you're all ready to...
Well, it's increasingly become a topic on. It's on
How
like
long
our
have you been
Facebook
waiting? You were
page.
just sitting there for 20 minutes to say Durbonia. You've just...
we talk about regionalization, and like back in 18 whatever, Birmingham was just one big municipality, and it was like there's so many economic activity and factories bustling. It's like, let's split apart, but you don't. That ended 60 years ago, didn't it? So
yeah, it was all Derby at one point, and Derby was actually what's now East Derby, which has to this day still causes bad feelings. But Ansonia was the last municipality to split off from Derby in 1895. They should have never done it. Merging municipalities back together and thinking much larger than just Ansonia and Derby is probably the smart thing to do. If Connecticut wants to be economically competitive, if people want to rein in education costs and give a quality education, they need to be seriously thinking about these things. I would just say that, Durbonia, I think, is a terrible name. Just call it Derby, and we can call it Ansonia High School.
Well,
Just call it Derby, and we'll keep
every
Ansonia High
commercial
School.
real estate developer is using the Oxmoor Plaza, Bethmore,
we gotta think. Is that something that'll like the hipsters will
Hansmore.
like? No,
but yeah.
I'm not taking an
Durbans?
official position on this, by the way. I'm biased, so.
But I mean,
But I think
so
the football
many
team should always be the
vested
Ansonia
interests
High School football team. I think that's a better move at this point. Nobody who I know from Derby football
Well,
will like
it would
me
never
anymore.
happen, because you'd have to. Part of this economic savings you talk about is laying off a lot of people that are public employees. So,
Well, that's not necessarily where all the costs are.
how did you start a part 3 of this podcast? It's been going on for an hour and 8 minutes.
This is a good place for me not to get involved,
right.
but
End it there.
But big dollars, education, public safety.
yeah.
Those are where the big dollars are.
All right, so you heard it here. Rick Dunne wants to dissolve the schools and police departments.
Oh, thanks.
All right, so that's it. Thanks a lot, Rick, for putting up with us. Unprepared, we were, but we figured if we're gonna do something experimental, we'll get Rick Dunne in here.
Well, at least 3
And
of us were unprepared.
and he won't mind. No, it'll all work out in the editing. So this is Eugene Driscoll on behalf of Rick Dunne and Ethan Fry. This is Valley Navel Gazing. See you next time.